The first book was The Crow Trap, published in 1999.
That's right.
And when we met, you told me a very interesting story about Vera. I mean, she's the most unlikely DC guy that you could ever come across, probably. A brown mac, a floppy rain hat.
Yeah, those aren't in the books. She's much bigger and much less attractive in the books.
But she almost didn't make it in the book, is that right?
No, that's right. I had a very new young editor who had decided that traditional crime fiction wasn't going to sell anymore. So she wasn't going to commission any more traditional detective stories. What she wanted was a big, standalone novel of psychological suspense. This was probably because Pam Macmillan published people like Minette Walters, who did big novels of psychological suspense and sold a lot more books than I did. But I thought, oh, I can probably do that. And I had this idea for 3 women doing an environmental survey up in the Northumberland National Park. My husband, Tim, managed lots of those surveys, and so we used to get the survey workers coming to stay with us on their way south, and so I talked to quite a lot of them about what they were doing. So I had these 3 women, a botanist, a zoologist, and somebody else that I can't remember, ornithologist probably, doing a survey before the creation of a big super quarry. And the environmentalists call it ground truthing. So looking to see if what's happening on the ground matches with the theory. And that seemed to me a great metaphor for being a detective, that you're looking to see what. And so I had this idea, and I had these 3 women, and one of them died, of course. You know, I wasn't moving that far from crime. I couldn't kill one anymore. And then about a third of the way through, I got really, really stuck because I don't plot in advance. And I didn't know what I was going to do with the story. And there's a great American thriller writer, Raymond Chandler, who did the Philip Marlowe books, who said, if you're stuck with a story, have a guy burst through a door with a gun. And if you've read the Philip Marlowe books, you'll know that he does that a lot. The plots don't really hang together, but there's lots of people bursting through doors. I don't do guns, you know, I'm too lazy to do the research. So I just thought I was writing a funeral scene, and I thought I'd just have the door burst open and see who came in. And it was one of those miraculous, wonderful moments that happen sometimes when you're writing. So the door did burst open, and the service had already started. They were halfway through the first hymn, and who burst in but Vera Stanhope. And I had her name as soon as she came in, and I describe her as looking more like a bad lady than a detective. She's carrying all her notes in a plastic carrier bag, and she's wearing those sort of sandals that climbers wear, you know, and her feet are mucky, and she's got bad skin, and there she is, Vera Stanhope in all her glory. But I think where she came from was, I was born in the mid-50s and grew up in a small town, and there were lots of formidable spinsters in that town. It was not that long after the war, and they were women who'd either lost sweethearts in the war, or who had been allowed to take on responsibilities that they might not otherwise have been allowed. And these women, I think, with some sense, had decided they would rather be single than be 1950s housewives. Because if you had a job then, if you were a teacher and you got married, you'd have to give up work. You know, there were all these men coming back from the war who the government thought needed employment. And they were, in our town, they were people like hospital matrons and the infant school head teacher. I remember wearing dreadful tweed skirts, frayed hems, thick, sensible shoes, thick stockings, and they were really competent. They had authority, and they didn't care at all what they looked like. And I think that's where my Vera came from, those strong women, single women that I knew when I was growing up. And I've been so lucky, really, that And the whole Vera on telly thing came about quite by chance, just a bit of luck, because I'd finished this book, The Crow Trap. This was before social media marketing, it was the end of the 90s, and so the publisher's catalogue was really quite important at that point. And Pam Macmillan had forgotten to put The Crow Trap in the catalogue, so it didn't sell very many copies. I mean, it was a really poor seller for them. And there were lots of paperbacks knocking around that had been remaindered and ended up in remainder bookshops and in charity shops. And one of them ended up in the Oxfam shop in Crouch End in North London. Somebody came in looking for a book to read on their holiday. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard this story before, but it's such a lovely story. And she wanted a nice big book because she was going to be away in Spain for a week. Picked up The Crow Trap. Nothing at all unusual about any of that. And we writers can be a bit sniffy about second-hand bookshops, you know, because you don't get the royalties. But the woman who picked it up was my fairy godmother. She's called Elaine Collins, and she was books executive for ITV Studios at the time. And they were looking for a series with a strong female lead to replace Frost on a Sunday night. And that's how Vera came to be on the television.